Hola, ahora tenemos una lección de verbos en el pretérito. Estos son verbos irregulares. Aquí es un repaso, se dice, a review. This is a review from concepts from Español 2. So there won't, let's see, I think there's like maybe one new verb in here, caber, I've added. Other than that, everything else should be a review. Make sure you do take notes and put that in your Spanish notebook and bring that to class in case there is an open note quiz. Okay. So what I do is I divide up the irregular verbs into two different groups. Then within one of those groups, I even break it down even further. Because with irregular verbs, we don't really have much to go on other than we have to memorize their forms. With preterite irregulars, there is a certain way that we can kind of group the information together to help you remember the forms in the preterite, because there are quite a few irregulars. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first group. First group I call is los pequeñitos. And los pequeñitos means like the little ones. Okay, so these are like the little verbs. And what I mean by that are verbs like ir and ser, which are one syllable in the infinitive. And then they also have short forms in the preterite. So ir and ser, we share the same form. So it could either be I went or I was. We'll just have to rely on context clues according to the meaning of is it ir or is it ser. So our forms of both ir and ser are fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuisteis, and fueron. Remember that the rule for vosotros is put whatever is in the to form, then just add is and you get the vosotros form. The next one we have is the verb dar. Dar is irregular. It has actually ER and IR endings. It's an AR verb, but it has the opposite vowel ending, like it has ER and IR. So it's di, diste, dio, dimos, disteis, and dieron. And I group that with ver because they have the same exact ending. So you can kind of see there how they are exactly the same. Dar is an AR verb, but it acts like ver. So you have vi, viste, vio, vimos, visteis, and vieron. So you should notice that those are exactly the same verb, except dar has a D and ver has a V. So I call those the little guys, or the little verbs. Okay, los pequeñitos. And one rule that stays true for all of the preterite irregular verbs is that there are no accent marks, okay, for any of these verbs. If it's irregular, you do not have to worry about accents. So that should make you pretty happy. Okay, now we have what we call la otra familia, so it's like the other family, and this is a large group of verbs. But even within this huge group of verbs, I've even broken it down a little bit. We can group them together as a whole because they all have the same endings. And then I've even grouped the stems together as well. So I'll explain here. So these three verbs, estar, tener, andar, I group together because they all have V's in them, okay? So the stem for estar is estuv, tener is tuv, andar is anduv. And remember, andar means to walk, or sometimes it's to ride, like andar en bicicleta. The next ones that I grouped together are, the next two that I grouped together are the ones that have U's in them. So poner is pus and poder is pud. These three I grouped together because they all have I's in their stems. Okay, so we have hacer, venir, and querer. Hacer, the stem is is, venir is vin, and querer is quis. So it keeps these stems stay all through the entire chart. And then the last two that I grouped together are saber and caber. They rhyme in the infinitive, and then they also rhyme in their subjunctive on the brain, and their preterite stem, soup and coop. So we take those stems, so you just need to memorize that, and then you memorize the same 6 endings for all of these verbs. So the first person endings are e and imos. The second person, the to in the vosotros, is iste, and then isteis. And then the third person is o and iron. So all we do is we take that stem and we attach the ending. So the yo form of estar is estuve. The to form of tener is tuviste. Andar, ella is anduvo. Poner, nosotros is pusimos. Poder, vosotros is pudisteis. Hacer, ellos is hicieron, and so on. So venir yo would be vine, querer, tú quisiste, saber, usted supo, caber, nosotros cupimos. So they keep the same stems, or they keep the same endings. We just changed the stem. So again, there are no accent marks. You should notice that again. They're irregular, no hay acentos. There is one thing that I do need to point out about hacer. So cuidado, so be careful. Keep an eye out for in the el and the ella form for hacer. That C changes to a Z, because if it sat with the C next to the O, it would be eco. So they actually have to change that C to a Z. So there is a little bit of an exception there as a spelling rule, so you just have to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so now that is one part of the other big family, and then there's another part. So la otra familia continua. And so these are the ones you might remember from last year that all have J's in them. Okay, so we've got traer and decir, conducir, producir, traducir. So all the ducir verbs act the same way. So we have traer, decir, and then everything that is in ducir. You can see here that they all have J's in their stems. So when we have J's, it's a little bit different. Now the yo and the nosotros form is still the same, and so is the tú and the vosotros. But in the third person plural, where on the screen before, in that grouping before, we had I-E-R-O-N. When there's a J, you just have E-R-O-N. So they brought, with traer would be trajeron. Decir would be dijeron. Conducir, condujeron. Produjeron, and tradujeron. So with those J's, you drop that I in the third person plural. Everything else stays the same. Your Spanish 2 teacher might have called these J stems. I think that's just kind of confusing because we eventually will, the next video will be on stem changing verbs, and I just don't want to get you confused by all the different terminology. But anyway, these are still irregular, okay? You just have to remember to chop off that I, okay, before the, in the third person singular. Third person plural, sorry. Okay, so no hay acentos. All right, now, here's one thing that I want to point out. Now, that says at the top, verbs that change meaning in the preterite. So, we've got 4 verbs here. Conocer, saber, poder, and querer. On the left-hand side, you have what it means in the present tense. And then there are meaning changes in the preterite. So, I just wanted to point these out. So, conocer is a regular verb in the preterite. We don't need to worry about it. It's not part of this presentation, but I still wanted to point these out because saber, poder, and querer are all irregular. So, conocer in the present tense is to know or to be acquainted with. However, when we put it in the preterite tense, we are actually saying to meet. Okay, so I met that couple yesterday. Yo conocí a esa pareja ayer. Saber is, in the present tense on the left-hand side, we know information. We know how to do something. However, in the preterite, it's the moment that we find out. Okay, so supimos la verdad anoche. Remember, it is irregular. There's a stem sup. So we found out the truth last night. So there's a meaning change there. There's poder is to be able to. In the preterite, it changes to manage or to seat or to succeed. So that's a little less like, there's not as much of a difference. Okay, so pudimos hacerlo ayer. We managed to do it yesterday. We attempted to do it and we succeeded. Querer in the preterite, querer in the present is I want. Okay, we've known that for a long time. However, in the preterite, it kind of takes on the meaning of to try. So, quise evitarlo, pero fue imposible, is I tried to avoid it, but it was impossible. So those are 4 meaning changes. All right, one last thing. It says, atención, in the preterite, verbs poder and querer have different meanings, depending on whether they are used affirmative or negative sentences. So affirmative meaning positive and negative meaning negative. So, obviously. So pude is I succeeded. We just talked about that in the previous slide. But no pude would be I failed. So that makes sense. It's the opposite. Quise is I tried, like we mentioned previously. But once you make that verb negative, no quise, it's I refused. Okay, and that's not used as often. A lot of times we use querer in the imperfect. We don't use it very much in the preterite. But if you would, this is what you would be saying. Either I tried or I refused to do something. Okay, so there's a little bit of a change there. Okay, and that is all for now. There will be another video due. The stem changing verb video will be due on next Wednesday, and I will get that out for you hopefully shortly. Don't forget the Google form. Gracias.